Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of History Bites. My name is Julia Ashworth, and today I'm serving as the moderator for our April program. This month, we're featuring Briana Erickson from the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker to continue our mini-series on the freedom of the press. As I just mentioned, Briana is a reporter of the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, where she documents violations and broader threats to press freedom worldwide. She previously worked as an investigative reporter at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, covering everything from the 2017 mass shooting on the Las Vegas Strip to legal battles over press freedom. Her work centers on human rights, police misconduct, and misuse of public funds. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Brianna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm excited to see what you have for us today.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can see my presentation I've got prepared for everyone. And oops, what did I do? There we go. All right. Yes, I'm with the Freedom US Press Freedom Tracker, which is a project of the Freedom of the Press Foundation. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you today a little bit about what we do. Um, as mentioned, I have been a journalist for more than 10 years, where throughout my reporting, I've seen firsthand the barriers put in front of journalists and how far some public officials will go to keep stories from seeing the light. And that's what's really inspired me to do this work. And one of the challenges of the job is that journalists don't want to be part of the story, but as we've said, if you can't tell the story, you are part of the story because it's another layer of corruption to prevent journalists from getting access to public records or trying to stop the public from knowing what their right to know what's going on. As journalists, we are the eyes and ears of the public, and we are protected under the First Amendment to report on what's happening, and any effort to impede that can allow a swath of corruption to take place without accountability, and our democracy can suffer for it. Um, so, about FPF, we were founded in 2012 and we provide journalists the tools, training, and advocacy they need to report safely, keep the public informed, and hold power accountable. It has several branches. One is Secure Job. We maintain it. It's a tool that allows news organizations, to securely accept documents from anonymous sources, as well as a digital training team who trains journalists, newsrooms, and allies in how to protect their work and sources in the digital era. Last year, we trained a record number of journalists, more than 3,000, and our advocacy team as well filed hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests and multiple lawsuits to expose government misconduct and reveal how our government is working for us. And of course, the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker is another arm of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, where we monitor and document virtually every press freedom violation in the U.S. The tracker launched in 2017. It systematically documents press freedom violations across 10 categories, from assaults on journalists to arrests, equipment seizures, equipment searches, denial of access, and subpoenas seeking protected reporting materials. There's also an other category that kind of encapsulates anything that doesn't fall under the purview of our normal categories. However, it counts as an obstruction. Sometimes that could be harassment, Or more recently, it was the Nashville Noticias reporter Stephanie Rodriguez who was arrested by ICE in what her attorneys say was retaliation for her reporting. And this is what the tracker looks like, the database. It's searchable, it's very intuitive. I welcome you to explore it, and if you're interested in seeing more of it, the it's a news database, so each entry is in an individual article that details who, what, when, where, and why. It also collects metadata, so we can analyze different trends, such as if the journalist was a student, if they felt targeted as a member of the press, if they were robbed in the course of their reporting, whether a federal agency was involved in the press freedom aggression, whether it happened at a protest, if it involved immigration, if the journalist was shot at with a crowd control munition, uh, just to name a few of subcategories that we also track. And we use a variety of sources to find our information, from court documents to interviews to articles to social media. Since launching, the tracker has documented more than 2,400 cases, analyses, and newsletters recording the state of press freedom in the US. And last year, we documented more than 275 press freedom violations, which was an almost 30% rise from 2024. Here you will see a lot of the violations were concentrated in California, Oregon, Minnesota, Illinois, New York, DC. You can see the different categories on the left. Um, but the majority last year involved journalists covering protests against immigration enforcement. Reporters in California specifically were heavily targeted, tear gassed, beaten, and arrested in the course of their work. As far as trends go, you could see in the bar graph on the right that 2020 was a huge spike. We tend to see a lot of press freedom aggressions when journalists are covering mass protests, which we saw after George Floyd was killed by police in Minnesota. We use all this data to analyze trends and contextualize broader patterns beyond what we're seeing at the micro level. In a time in a time where officials try to undermine the truth, documentation is essential, and last year the tracker was cited more than ever in court filings, national stories, academic research, and legislative debates. One trend that I think is worth noting is that student journalists and independent journalists are more vulnerable to press freedom aggressions because they don't have the support or the backing of a major legacy media outlet. Some officials know that and are more apt to maybe disregard their rights. As you can see, more student journalists were assaulted, detained, denied access, or faced legal orders in 2025 than any other year in the tracker's database. Already in 2026, 3 student journalists have been assaulted, 2 were zip tied and arrested while covering immigration-related protests. Here are some other examples of what some student journalists have faced at protests. Um, Here are some different kinds of violations, including the student magazines being shut down, student journalists being removed from covering a court hearing. Those are just a few examples of some of the cases we've documented. In 2026, it has not stopped. We documented more press aggressions in the first 2 months of 2026 than we did in that same time period any previous year. Protests against immigration and Trump administration policies have continued, as well as other press freedom violations. After protests erupted in Minnesota against ICE operations, we documented 18 incidents there in January alone. This is kind of a striking image of one of the cases we documented. The photographer John Abernathy was arrested, pepper sprayed, and tear gassed by federal officers. You can see in his eyes him reacting to the pepper spray. The photo on the right, he is tossing his camera so that it would not be seized and that one of his colleagues could take control of his camera to protect the integrity of what he was witnessing. A lot of journalists are concerned with what happens to their equipment when they're detained. Some have had materials deleted, and if not that, it just obstructs them from getting their information released in real time. They may not know when they might get their devices back, and that in itself can have a chilling effect. On the subject of search and seizures or subpoenas, some other notable cases recently. The Washington Post reporter Hannah Nathanson had her home searched by the FBI and her devices seized. They've been seeking The government has sought a subpoena to search those devices. And even though a judge later ruled that the government can't search the reporter's devices, the seizure itself may have already had a chilling effect. Uh, in August 2023, Kansas police raided the offices of the Marion County Record and the home of its co-publishers, seizing computers, servers, cell phones, and reporting materials as part of an investigation into alleged identity theft. Days later, the county attorney withdrew the search warrants, but again, the action itself can deter sources from wanting to speak to reporters because this has happened, and that in itself is chilling. Some hard data, the numbers of equipment search or seizures by law enforcement. Since our launch, the tracker has recorded at least 122 incidents in which law enforcement searched or seized journalists' equipment. While 54 occurred during protests, dozens of others unfolded far from protest lines, at reporters' homes, in newsrooms, at courthouses, and at airports and border crossings. The data show a consistent pattern. Journalists' equipment is often seized first, and in some cases held for months or years, while courts assess the legality of those seizures much later. In 14 cases, the seized equipment remains in government custody today. Working as a journalist has taught me to be more mindful of digital security and protecting information. So I'd like to go through a couple quick recommendations that I think could benefit the public at large in protecting their devices. Think through what information you do have and on what devices and how you would like those to be protected. Um, what might somebody be capable of if they got a hold of that information, and what is the likelihood that they would target you, and what kind of risk would that pose to you? Secure your accounts. That's the main takeaway. But you can do that by doing two-factor authentication and understanding what information someone might need to access your accounts if they were trying uh, to get in through a back door. We use 1Password. It is it's just a secure password ma manager. You only have to remember one password, and that allows you to store securely very unique passwords that are long and random for all of your accounts. And that way, you're not using the same password for every single account you have, but you only need to remember the one that'll get you into your vault. Um, Here's an example of what two-factor authentication looks like. And security keys are one of the most secure and easiest ways. You can buy one for $25, and all you have to do is put it into your laptop, and it's a physical key that unlocks your accounts rather than um, needing a password. And passphrases are better than passwords. An 8-letter password with numbers and symbols can be cracked in a few days, but an 8-word phrase could take centuries. Um, yes, so in summary, one password or another password manager, two-factor authentication, and we don't use Face ID or Touch ID because they are less secure. And if you do like to use it, we suggest turning it off when you're traveling, power down all your devices when traveling. It just makes it way more secure in the event that your devices are seized or attempted to be searched while you're traveling. Also, to close, I invite you to subscribe to Freedom of the Press Foundation's newsletters. We have several newsletters. We have the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker updates that are monthly, and there's some digital security tips newsletter. There's a secrecy newsletter, a newsletter on J School News. Anything that you're interested in regarding press freedom, I invite you to go to freedom.press/newsletters. And our work at the tracker ensures that these press freedom violations are not just headlines. They are evidence that can be used in the fight for stronger legal protections for journalists. And with that,
Wonderful.
I welcome any questions.
Thank you so very much for that really awesome presentation, Brianna. That was truly fascinating to hear just how you all are able to collect all of this data. Um, I guess, one of my first questions for you is if, I want to ask if you can speak to some of the methods that you and others at the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker use to collect this data.
Yeah, well, we use a variety of methods. Just like any beat that I've covered in the past, I've kind of just developed a Rolodex of sources that I put feelers out to. I'm on the West Coast, so I try to centralize my sourcing on the West Coast. So I'm always reaching out to sources just to check in on them or press associations in those states to see if there's any issues. I'm looking to see if any newspapers write about their challenges. At the Las Vegas Review Journal, we wrote a column that's still happening today called "What Are They Hiding?" which is just kind of a back story to look, we're fighting for these public records and they're not providing them, or, you know, challenges and barriers to what they're reporting, which might be documented in the tracker as well. Court subpoenas, we've scoured to see if news agencies are included in those through Bloomberg court records, and uh, we on social media when we know there's a major protest happening, we're hunting down to see if there's been posts or video documentation that we can save and reach out to those journalists that we see um, in real time facing press freedom aggression.
For sure, for sure. No, absolutely. And that's really awesome that you're able to collect this data, but I guess I'm also wondering, where does it go? How are you ultimately able to use some of this data that you all are collecting?
Yeah, for us, we like to do analyses that encapsulate what's happening at a larger scale.
Yeah,
Like for example, uh, last year I did an analysis that's like, oh, so you've seen the each individual case that we've posted, but
yeah,
here's what this means in the larger scale, and here's how many
for
journalists
sure.
have been injured. Here's their stories, and here's a little bit about what they're fighting for in court. Even though they have a preliminary injunction against the LA Police Department, just to stop them from interrupting their reporting, it's continuing to happen. And so not only is it for us to give people the bigger picture, as well as documenting every individual incident, I think it's helpful for people who might be fighting for stronger protections in their state law, or in maybe even in their
Absolutely.
in the federal law as well.
No, that's really awesome. Thank you. To sort of go on a slightly different track here, last month, we spoke with Dr. Sam Lebovic, who had an incredible presentation, who looked at a lot of the historic context on how the freedom of the press really developed. Um, but I wanted to ask you, you're talking a lot about, 21st century recent developments. Why do you think that it is valuable to continue these discussions into the present when Gunston Hall itself typically centers our discussions in the 18th century?
That's a good question. I think it's important to note that our freedoms aren't guaranteed. They require constant attention and protection. Uh, and our founding fathers, like George Mason, understood the essential pillars of democracy, including the vital role of a free and independent press that can report without fear or favor. Continuing these discussions now help us connect those ideals to the challenges that we face today. When any time that the freedom of the press is questioned or challenged, it is our responsibility to stand up for those rights and use every avenue available to us to defend them. If we don't actively exercise our freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, um, then we risk losing them, and we need to ensure that they remain strong and resilient for future generations.
Absolutely. You said that very well. No, absolutely, absolutely, for sure. Um, Yes, oh, 100%. I think, while we talk a lot about press freedom here at Gunston Hall in terms of what George Mason was really focusing on in the 18th century, and how he really viewed the importance of press freedom at the time, you're absolutely correct in saying, well, this is absolutely still a freedom that we value today and we want to continue valuing for the future. And so how do we make sure that we're maintaining this freedom?
Absolutely.
Going forward. Um, I'm sort of a little bit interested in your story and how you got involved in all of this. What really interested you to this research, this career path?
Yeah. Well, when I was a reporter at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, I wrote a lot about press freedoms in the terms of the what are they hiding column. Like, oh, for example, there was a police department I was investigating that had some emails basically saying that they were vetting reporters that wanted to do interviews to make sure
Hmm.
that they were positive.
Oh,
And I I wrote about that because I thought it was important that people know that they don't want to answer questions from everybody. They're going to pick and choose who they answer questions to, even though they're accountable to the city that um, pays for them to run and work for
For
them.
sure.
And
Yeah.
um, I will also say in 2022, my colleague Jeff Gehrman was murdered by a public official that he was writing about, and
Yeah.
that was a personal experience that the newsroom went through. But even after that, his devices were seized by the police that were investigating his murder,
Yeah.
and the main concern there was that the police and the law enforcement and the prosecutors would be searching his devices, which had sensitive sourcing and materials from within those agencies.
I
And
see.
I wrote about, you know, the Nevada shield law that shields journalists from having to testify about their sources and their reporting methods.
Yeah.
And the newspaper argued that those protections still exist, even if the reporter has been murdered. And
Okay.
um, we were able to win at the Nevada Supreme Court to be able to say, yes, we will search his devices and let law enforcement know if anything is important to the murder case, but but you know, separating everything that was confidential reporting materials. And
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
really upheld his rights even in death, but also not hindering the getting justice for his murder.
No, absolutely. That sounds incredibly challenging. And I can absolutely see why that would push you um, to want to do this kind of work. I mean, you're absolutely right. It is um, very, very influential, very, very um, powerful to say, hey, look, there are potentially press violations that are happening here. What can we do about it? And I guess in that vein, have you in your time at the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, at the Freedom of the Press Foundation, um, have you experienced anything surprising or unexpected, either in, your research or data collection at any point throughout your time there?
Yeah, I guess I would say that while we often think that it is firmly established, and um, I'd seen it be challenged at my local newsroom and in such an extreme way. Um, I was I was surprised, I guess, to see that even with court orders, it did not stop press freedom violations from happening in real time. Um,
I see.
so, I mean, if a court order, that seems to be the strongest order that there is to enforce your rights, and if that doesn't stop um, inf aggressions from happening, it's definitely surprising to me how willing agencies are to flout court orders, and that's what we're seeing quite a bit right now.
That makes total sense. That is absolutely um, very unexpected and very shocking to see something like that. I absolutely totally understand. Yes. All right, so we're just about out of time, but I do have one final question for you. And I asked this of Dr. Sam Levovic. I'm going to ask this of my speaker next month as well. But for people who are not involved in journalism, all of our viewers, our listeners, what should they know? How does the freedom of the press impact them?
Yeah, I think for those who aren't involved in journalism directly, it's important to understand that freedom of the press isn't just about reporters, it's about everyone. And a free press ensures that the public has access to accurate, independent information, which is essential for them to make informed decisions in a democracy about who they're voting for or who they want to represent them, um, and what issues matter to them. It also serves as a check on power to hold institutions accountable and in ways that directly affect people's lives. So it's not just journalists who are impacted. If press freedom is at risk, the public loses transparency and the ability to fully engage with the world around them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that is so true. And we saw that, in our discussion on historical press freedoms last month, and we continue to see that in discussions on press violations today. Thank you so very much, Brianna, for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you so much to our audience for taking your time out of your day to come listen to us. Please join us next month as we finish highlighting the Freedom of the Press series. Maisha Pukan from the Student Press Law Center will be leading a discussion on the freedom of the press on Wednesday, May 20th. We hope to see you then, and as always, stay hungry.
Thank you.